Welcome to week 3 of the Direct Agents 10-Minute Trends webinar. We have some really great content for to cover with you guys today. And of course, if you do have any questions, please feel free to chat them to us. And if we have some time at the end, we will go over them. So first off, my name is Megan Conahan. I'm an EVP at Direct Agents.
And I'm Jackson Richards, Director of Strategy with Direct Agents.
Awesome. So today we're going to cover kind of 3 main things. So first is the increase in consumer confidence that we've been seeing some upticks in. Second, some digital KPI trends that we're seeing between states that are open and states that are still closed. And then third and finally are the Amazon earning numbers that they just recently released. So let's just jump right into it. First, consumer confidence. So we've been talking a lot over the last couple of weeks about some upticks we're seeing across specific categories. And really what we've been seeing is more holistic kind of consumer confidence increases. So Jackson, can you talk a little bit more about what we're seeing, how it's been trending week over week, and what that means for the advertisers that are tuned in today?
Right. So if you tuned in over the last few weeks, you've heard, as you mentioned, you've heard us cover specific categories in which consumer spending and demand has returned. And what we've seen over the last few weeks is more research coming out that holistically, just around the country across categories, consumer confidence is starting to come back. And I think it makes sense as we've seen states start to reopen. People are starting to feel that there's a light at the end of this tunnel. And people are seeing that while their life may not be going back to exactly how it was before the pandemic, they're starting to see a path for going back to work as states have been either reopening or releasing their plans for returning people to work, and as well as just getting out of their house and hopefully nicer weather. I think that's just contributing to an overall sense of we're starting to move past this. I'm going to be starting to earn more money again, and I'm going to start being able to spend across different categories again. And we see a lot of people thinking about, and we're asking about travel, right? How are people going to be able to spend their summers? And that's something, of course, that's still going to take some time to come back. We're seeing still a pretty low percentage of people who feel like they're going to be able to really take vacations, or at least the vacations they had planned for this summer. But that percentage of people who do have confidence in their summer vacations is starting to trickle up slowly. So I think people are just really starting to reimagine what their summer plans are going to look like.
Yeah, that's a good point. What ties really nicely into consumer confidence trends that we've been seeing are some of the differences between the states that are still closed and the states have reopened, or who maybe never closed, for example. And just so everyone knows, the Direct Agents team has been tracking this data, and will continue to do so, obviously. But we're seeing really interesting trends as these kind of like 2 types of states that are closed and then states that are still open continue to kind of change. So Jackson, can you talk a bit about what we're seeing from the KPIs that we've been tracking?
Sure. So actually, over the last 6 or 8 weeks in general, we've seen pretty strong metrics from our e-commerce campaigns. It depends on categories for sure, but we've covered certain categories over the last few weeks: gaming, toys, grocery, of course, home furnishing, things like that, where people have needed to spend based on just the fact that everyone's spending more time at home. Particularly in those categories, we've seen really strong e-commerce metrics throughout the last 8 weeks. But as we've started to see certain states, a handful of states open over the last week or 2 weeks or so, we've started to look at what is the impact on businesses, particularly in e-commerce, versus ones that have not reopened. So the first thing I want to mention is whether over the last few weeks, whether it's states that have reopened or states that are still closed, we're seeing that conversion rates are either flat or increased. So nothing has been down across the board. But for states that have reopened, we're seeing conversion rate up almost 10%. Transactions are up 17%. And this is against versus closed states where we've seen that conversion rate has been flat versus transactions being up 7%. So pretty good metrics across the board, but particularly strong for states that have reopened. So this is a great indicator of what we can hopefully expect as more states start to outline their plans for reopening. People are getting back to work, and going back to what we were talking about a moment ago, as consumer confidence is starting to return, I think we're just going to see spending continue to increase across a wide set of different categories.
Yeah, and just a point, like I guess a 2.0 question to this is, for advertisers, are there any things that you should think about changing or doing bid modifications for the states that are maybe open versus states that are still closed? Are we at that place yet where it makes sense to make some pivots to your strategy, or are we still kind of in a wait and see kind of like holding period?
I think they're just more tactical changes for sure, but we're already starting to recommend those with our partners, right? If there are states that are already open that where there's a high percentage of their target audience in those states, we're seeing that they're spending. So now is the time to go after that audience. Or if you are trying to target your audience in states that are a week or maybe 2 weeks away from opening, now is the time to get in front of them. So as they start going back to work and start earning again, that your brand will be top of mind. So yeah, we're already having those conversations with partners, and they're starting to implement some, as you mentioned, like bid modifications and things like that.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see when some of the more major states open, like the New Yorks and California. That will be extremely interesting, I think.
Yeah.
And the final thing that we wanted to talk about is obviously all of the big tech companies released Q1 performance numbers, and we have over here at Direct Agents been specifically interested in the Amazon release numbers. So Amazon released their Q1 numbers for Amazon ads specifically. It's up 44% year over year. And Jackson, you and I have been talking about Amazon is completely winning during this time of COVID for the last handful of months, but do you think that this is entirely COVID related, or it's a much broader trend?
It's a broader trend for sure. In fact, I would say that they posted this strong growth for their ads business despite COVID. So, Q1, their ad business was up 44% year over year. Their ad business has been growing pretty consistently and seeing accelerating growth over the last few years, especially over the last year. But actually, their growth had slowed a little bit towards the end of March. I think that makes a lot of sense as the pandemic really hit, especially in major cities in March in the United States. There was like a couple week period where a lot of consumers were really scared and kind of hit pause on all spending. And of course, brands accordingly hit pause just to kind of take a second to reassess their priorities and their strategies and pause spending. And then, as we've talked about in the previous webinars over the last few weeks, continued spending and getting back in the marketing activity and things like that. So, it's despite COVID, but I actually think that, what's happened over the course of the last few months has put Amazon in a really strong position going forward, particularly for advertisers, right? So over the last 8 weeks, people have been stuck inside their homes. And even in categories where physical retail has been really sticky, like grocery or clothes or home goods and furniture and things like that, people have started shopping online within those categories right now. And we're talking about like tens of millions of people where e-commerce and shopping online was not their default mode of purchasing, and now it's going to be going forward. So marketers are going to, of course, follow where their consumers are, and it's going to be increasingly in online marketplaces, first and foremost Amazon, but also Walmart and Target and other stores like that. So we're expecting the growth of Amazon's ad business to accelerate and really start challenging Google and Facebook for marketers' dollars going forward.
Yeah, and that's a good point that they've been growing in spite of COVID. I know a lot of the brands that we were seeing and that we talked to and work with, they had to pause a lot of their media spend purely because they were out of stock on a lot of. So, I mean, I can only imagine what that growth number would be if we didn't have those out of stock issues. So, I mean, it'll be very interesting to see what Q2 is. We do have a couple questions. One going back to the states opening up. Do you see, are we seeing any trends as far as like I guess, CPM rates in those states, or are they staying pretty flat as well?
It's remained pretty flat, or I would say that CPMs have fluctuated consistently. They have been down, I guess, in the aggregate over the last few months. As marketers have pulled back and the markets have been a little bit less competitive. But as states have reopened, we have not seen a huge shift from that dynamic that we've seen over the last 8 weeks. So the opportunity is definitely still there for advertisers. Yeah.
Okay. And then last question, and hopefully we can get it in, just be a minute or two over.
I'll
Are
chat.
we seeing or are we recommending any messaging changes as states are reopening?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it doesn't necessarily need to be anything major. I just think it's really important for brands to acknowledge, what is going on with their consumers and what is happening, for their consumers or their customers in New York City, for example, might be very different from another state. So you just need to, put yourself in the mindset of your customers. And we're always having those conversations with our clients about how do we do that and how do we have messaging or creative that is impactful, is going to be impactful and meaningful for them. So it doesn't necessarily need to be a major shift, but it's going to be really important for brands to acknowledge just the situation that their customers are in.
Yeah, and I will say if anybody who's tuned in has any specific questions about tactics or anything like that, please feel free to email us. We have a lot of recommendations we've been making to our brands. We'd be happy to share with you. But that's about it for us today. We're just 1 minute over our 10-minute trends. So thank you guys so much for joining, and make sure to catch us next Wednesday at 1:30 Eastern. If you do have any other questions or want some of those tactical implementation suggestions, please feel free to email marketing@directagents.com.